Africa was the teacher of the world, but the student became jealous of the teacher.
If the Bible is true, and the story of the Bible is true, with Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, all things that you think about, if that is true, then what you call Africa was more developed and more scientific, more than Europe.
This is the cradle of human civilization. But we have been so beaten over the years. We have been so abused over the years. They enslaved us because they feared us. They colonized us because they feared us. They now have a new project, the neo-colonial project. And I'm told that the neo-colonial project is a twin of another child called colonization. Their mother is imperialism. And imperialism never changes its character. It only changes the masks that it wears. We must be wary of it. When they came here and abused Christianity, they told us to close our eyes in prayer. And when we opened our eyes, the land had disappeared. That is who they are. They are not our friends.
Wagwan kings and queens, welcome back to my YouTube commentary. Thank you so much. I'm sending so much love, and for you being here just means a lot. Means that you want to know about what is happening around the globe, around black people. Now, before I go even deeper into what I'm going to talk about today, I'm saying this. If you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, please make sure you subscribe. But more so, the important thing, make sure you always share my video to those who you think may want to listen, to those who you think may be important to them. Now, let's roll. I'm going to talk about one thing, the forbidden history. I'm going to talk about the forbidden African history that could free every black mind, because there is this one thing that they don't want Africans to know. There is this one thing they don't want black people to know, because what we know who we are, when we realize who we truly are, then black power will increase to turbo version. So I'm going to talk about this forbidden history. For example, before all these lies, before the lie, before the illusion, before every manipulation, before they call it Africa, before they call this continent Africa, this land had 1,000 sacred names. And one of the names was Alec Blan. Another name was Kush. Another name was Nubia, was Kemet, was Punt. It was not a dark continent. No. Africa or Alec Blan was not a dark continent. It was the shining womb of humanity. From the Great Lakes to the Nile, people lived in harmony with nature. They lived in harmony with mathematics, with spirit. They studied the stars, mastered time, they measured time, they built architecture that still defines modern machines. When Europe was still learning to read about firelight, Alec Blan already mapped the heavens.
Well, they know that. The West knows that. They're acutely aware of their actual total dependence upon Africa. If Africa manufactured, if they used their own resources, their own minerals, their own materials for their own industries, well, the entire economy of the West would collapse. And with the collapse of their economy, their whole so-called civilization would collapse. Africa is the foundation upon which they built their house. So they know this. And like I said, this is why no matter what else changes in the world, no matter how power dynamics shift in the world, the subjugation of Africa has been maintained for over 800 years. There's literally nothing more important to them than this. They tell you that if you nationalize, then there will be massive capital flight, investors will run away, and so on. Well, think about that for a second. They're trying to scare you with consequences that they themselves will be imposing. They're warning you that if you do something that is in your country's best interest, they will punish you. This is very different from telling you that the policy in and of itself is actually bad. They're telling you that they will make it a bad policy because of what they will do to you if you implement it. You understand? These people are threatening you, and then you're supposed to trust their advice? The advice of these neoliberal predators? You're supposed to listen to them and trust their advice when they are blatantly telling you that they will punish you if you do something to try to make things better, to try to change things. I mean, they couldn't make it more obvious, their malice. They couldn't make their malice more obvious. They couldn't make it any more obvious how against your best interests they are. How much they put their own private interests above the interests of their country. They're openly identifying themselves to you as your enemy. You understand me? I mean, they're not saying that nationalization doesn't work. They're not saying that it isn't beneficial. They're saying that they will do everything in their power to make sure it doesn't work. They're saying that they will sabotage nationalization for their own sake, for the sake of their own profit interests. And still you let this type of people have a say in policy discourse? Well, that's humiliating. They hold you in contempt and they don't even hide it. I mean, for instance, the nationalization of key sectors, such as mining, such as energy and finance. This is essential to try to break the stranglehold of foreign capital on your country, and to ensure that the country's resources are actually used for the benefit of the people and for the benefit of the domestic economy. The countries in the global south, in fact, they're in a position today to actually dictate the terms now. If Westerners want to pull out their capital, so say you nationalize, okay, if Westerners want to pull out their capital, they want to withdraw their investments, okay, go ahead. Dig around in your own lands for the minerals you need to make your stuff, and good luck to you. And all the global south countries, it's time for them to break away from this paradigm, break away from Western domination and start implementing all of those policies that they know perfectly well will benefit them, whether America likes it or not. I mean, can you imagine if the Gulf countries didn't put their oil sector under government control? Where would they be now? But look at where they are now. Look at the amount of capital they have now. No, this millennium-long system of subjugation needs to come to an end. And it really doesn't matter if the road to liberation is a little bit rocky. I'd rather be traversing a rocky road than be buried under the rubble, which is where the West has kept Africa for centuries. This is the richest and most important continent on the planet. And the West stole your riches and they stole your importance, and they've been an imposter on the throne for far too long. It doesn't make any sense to be afraid of someone whose power is actually dependent upon you. That's a psychological power, not an actual power. They have a psychological power over you. But every element of their real power is completely derived from you yourselves. It's like your hand is on the tap that the hose is attached to that they use to waterboard you. And all you have to do is turn it off.
There came a time in 1506, after we lost power in Spain. The Africans ruled Spain from 711. We were calling ourselves Moors, M-A-U-E-R-S, then M-O-O-R-S. From 711 until 1485, 774 years, when we built and brought into Europe the university system, building the University of Salamanca, S-A-L-A-M-A-N-C-A in Spain, a copy of the University of Genève from ancient Ghana, which was equally a copy of the University of Sankore in Tombouctou, which the French later called Timbuktu. Now, look, if you want to read it, read Stanley Lane Poole's The Moors in Spain, written in 1887, or Alejandro Macaziza. Read his book in Spanish, The Moors in Spain, and said that even the bath was introduced by those Africans.
He separated the blacks who built a civilization in Egypt and Ethiopia from the rest of the black race, and he called them brown-skinned whites. Ancient Egypt became white only in the 19th century and in the 20th century. And the scholar who is responsible for this is Seligman, the noted anthropologist from England, Seligman. White supremacy argues that blacks are inferior than white intellectually. They are subhuman and they are incapable of building a civilization. White supremacy had one dilemma until Seligman came. The dilemma was ancient Egypt was black according to the Greek and the Roman scholars. 10 of them said that, including Aristotle and Plato. 10 of them said that in writing. They had this dilemma. Ancient Egyptian was black. So if blacks are inferior intellectually and are incapable of building a civilization, how come the ancient Egyptians built a civilization? Seligman found the solution for this dilemma. He came up with a theory called the Hemite theory. He separated the blacks who built a civilization in Egypt and Ethiopia from the rest of the black race, and he called them brown-skinned whites, or the Hemites. So Seligman saved white supremacy from this dilemma, and all the white scholars followed him from that time on. This was at the end of the 19th century. And since that time, white scholarship says that ancient Egypt is white.
When the Europeans were living in caves, we already had the Benin Empire, longer than the Chinese walls. We already had the Monomotapa Empire. We already had the walls of Timbuktu. Before the Europeans knew whether it is the earth that went round the sun, the Dogon already knew astronomy as it is known today. They knew. When they could not write, the Africans had already identified the value of zero in mathematics. When they did not know about Caesarean section, operations of that nature already taking place in the continent of Africa. When they were dying in snow and in ice, in Ethiopia, in Axum, they were already building the underground edifices in Lalibela. They were building pyramids in Sudan and in Egypt. There were already libraries in Carthage. Pythagoras and all these people were already learning their philosophy from Orunmila among the Yoruba. We were there. We had a culture that was complete with science, complete with mathematics, complete with the arts. And when they say we have no art, they forget that they have stolen all of them, and they are to be found in the museums in Europe. If we had no culture and if we could not do the things they say we could not do, why were they plundering the things that they plundered?
There's a great book written by probably the greatest archaeologist and cultural anthropologist in human history. Not black, but I would say he was the greatest of all time. I'm sure you know his name, Sheikh Anta Diop from Senegal. He wrote a book called The African Origin of Civilization. Everybody needs to read it. This was the scholar who snuck into, I don't want to say snuck, went into the temples of Kemet, took melanin, or should I say took pigment or skin off of the mummies of the pharaohs, came up with a melanin dosage test and proved that the kings and queens of Kemet had to be African based on the percentage of melanin in their skin. It was Sheikh Anta Diop who proved to the world that all 5 stages of modern man originated in Africa. The first stage of modern man, all African. Second stage, all African. Third, all African. Homo sapien, the 4th stage, all African. And then we're the 5th stage, Homo sapien sapien. Yeah. It was only the Homo sapien sapien who left Africa. If the Homo sapien sapien, modern African, never leaves Africa, we never go into Europe, we never experience the Ice Age, Europeans never come, they never evolve. Yeah. Asians never evolve. Indians never evolve. You don't get another race on earth if the African never leaves Africa. And for that reason, I would like to ask our great African ancestors, why in the hell did you leave the continent? Because if you didn't, we wouldn't be dealing with white supremacy.
So we're in the enclosure now, and I want you to feel the grandness of this place. Look at those walls. Feel those walls. I look like a dwarf in front of these walls. So imagine what it felt like to come from another country, to come from Europe, and then you get to see this in an African civilization that you thought was backward. And then you see rocks that are cut perfectly, laid on top of each other, and walls that are that high. You'd be forced to say that this was built by aliens. And that is what Cecil John Rose decided to say, that this was built by aliens. But this was built by my ancestors. Your ancestors, if you're African. Your ancestors, if you're in the African diaspora. And they created this grandness. Some of it is beginning to fall apart, so there's going to be restoration that takes place. But the feeling of being in here, it's almost magical. So powerful. But it makes me feel so great because it makes me know that in my DNA comes greatness. In my DNA comes architects. It comes stonemasons. Comes people that dealt with gold, goldsmiths, ironsmiths. They're the ones that built this greatness. And those people are my ancestors. The blood of these people is in my veins. And this greatness is a part of me. And that's why I believe that I will be involved. And I'm involved in rebuilding the great Zimbabwe.
If the Bible is true, and the story of the Bible is true, with Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, all things that you think about, if that is true, then what you call Africa was more developed and more scientific, more than Europe. Because how can you grow food in 7 years and feed the whole world? How do you know the value of other currencies from different countries? And you exchange it in your country while the people are taking food. How do you communicate with the people from Canaan and other countries who have come to buy food? The Ethiopian eunuch knew how to read Hebrew 2,000 years ago. And he came to Israel in a chariot. The Bible talks about the military might of Egypt. If the Bible is true, the Bible said the chariots of Pharaoh fell into the Red Sea. If Africa was moving fighters on horses militarily, that is 7,000 years BC, which is 9,000 years before Jesus came. And these guys had garrisons and had weaponry and they could chase you on horses. Then what you call Africa backward was advanced. The things I read and I question myself. So which part of Africa am I? What part of Africa am I did I inherit? Look at the person next to you. Don't say anything. Just be amazed and ask yourself a question. What part of Africa are you from? Are you from the African Egyptians era? Are you from the Ethiopian? Which part of Africa did you come from? The Bible said they knew how to embalm bodies. Because when Jacob died, he died in Egypt. And they mourned him for days, for months. They did not take a rotten body.
Now, let me talk about the era of greatness. The era of greatness is about the glory that was never mentioned in class, the glory about Africa. For example, Kemet, the land of black soil, the kingdom of pyramids and philosophy. Its scholars invented paper, its scholars invented surgery, they invented algebra, and they invented architecture, okay? Precise to the millimeter. Its priests taught that body, mind, and spirit were one vibration. And then came Kush, south of Kemet, where black queens, the Kandakes, commanded armies. Then came Axum, trading gold and ivory with Asia while Europe slept in superstition. Then came Mali, Songhai, Benin, Zimbabwe, Mapungumbwe. empires of light. You know, we had the University of Timbuktu. University of Timbuktu had thousands of students studying astronomy, studying law and medicine long before Oxford and Harvard existed. And this was not coincidence. This was civilization in its purest form. Africa was the teacher of the world, but the student became jealous of the teacher. And now he decided what? He will turn things around and began to create a lie. They began to erase. We all know every empire falls, not because of weakness, but because greed seeks what others have. Okay? When foreigners or when foreign explorers arrived on Lake Blanc shores, on African shores, they found wealth beyond measure. They found ivory, they found gold, they found salt, they found knowledge, but they did not come to learn. They came to own. So the greed made them erase what we have. First, they came the traders, and then the missionaries, and then the soldiers. And behind them, they marched the lie that Africa had no history. They buried manuscripts, they banned language, they replaced drums with bells, and they told the children that civilization begins elsewhere. They rewrote maps, they renamed cities after their kings. They even redrew the borders so that brothers would fight brothers. Colonization was not only the theft of land, but it was the systematic election of identity, systematic deletion of identity. Once you rewrite a people's past, you can program their future. That is realistic. But we had our ancestors, and there's a spiritual science of our ancestors. The African spirituality was never about superstition, but it was cosmic science. Okay, the donjon of Mali charted Cyrus B, a star invisible to naked eye. You can't see it with a naked eye. Now, describing its orbit centuries before Western telescopes confirmed it, this was a great discovery of Mali, but they hide it from everyone. Okay, the priests of Kemet built pyramids aligned perfectly with the Orion's belt and the solstice. Every ritual, every drum beat, every dance encoded mathematics and rhythm, frequency that heal. Our ancestors understood that spirit and science are not enemies, that they are reflections. They healed with sound, communicated with nature, and measured time through the heartbeat of the earth, you know. And that's why invaders fear African spiritualities, because it connected the human being directly to creation. So if you can hear the creator yourself, then you need no middleman. You need no colonizer. You need no savior in foreign robes, okay? They call it witchcraft because Africa were communicating direct to their creators, and they mean what? They called it witchcraft. They outlawed it and built churches on top of sacred sites. But even after all this, I know the vibration still remains. Every drum still remembers, you know. Now, they did all things, but the worst thing they did to African children, the worst thing they did to us, it's what I call the mental chains. Okay? You know, physical chain can break, but mental chain, they are harder and harder to break. After the ships and plantation came to an end, they came to our classrooms. Colonial educations taught black children to memorize Europe and forget home. They taught children to wear foreign names, to dream foreign dreams, and to see foreign gods. And generations grew up believing that civilization began in Greece when Greece learned it from Africa. They grew up believing that whiteness was purity and blackness was a curse. That is the root of everything. It's the root of modern confusion. The slave system rebranded as schooling. Yet even within that darkness, sparks remained. Storytellers whispered truth under moonlight. Drummers coded rebellion into rhythm. Grandmothers hid wisdoms inside proverbs. Our culture became resistance disguised as tradition. It came colonization, and this they call it civilization, but no, it wasn't civilization. What they really meant was erasing. When the Berlin Conference in 1884 carved Africa into European territories and European property, no African was invited. Lines were drawn with rulers on map, split nations, families, tribes, and souls. They colonized, built railroads, not to connect Africans, but to extract Africa. Every track led from a mine to a port. Every school taught loyalty to a crown, an ocean away. They replaced community with competition. They replaced cooperation with control. And the village elders, wisdom was replaced by the colonial officer decree. The drums that once signaled ceremony, they were banned. They banned these drums as threats because they knew an awakening Africa spirit cannot be ruled. So they flipped that script, and our gods became demons. Their demons became our gods, became saints. That's what they did. They changed our gods, they call it demons, and their demons, they rebranded it to our gods. When we spoke our language, they call it dialect, and they call their accent education. And that's how they colonize our mind. The great invasion, without firing a single shot, without using the gun. Of course, in Africa, we have hidden heroes of that time, hidden heroes of resistance, because we never bowed quietly. We had someone like Queen Ziga of Ndongo, dressed as a man to meet Portuguese generals and demanded they treat her as an equal. Yasa Santewa of the Ashanti led thousands of warriors against British troops, declaring that if you men won't fight, then we women will. That's what she did. We have Samore Traore, we have Dedan Kimathi, we have Mekatilili Wamenza, we have Shaka Zulu. So these are the names that echo through time, a proof that resistance was our mother tongue, because they fought with spears, they fought with strategy, and they fought with the spirit. Even when the weapon of the enemy were louder, but ours was stronger, and it will always be stronger. Colonial history called our fighters rebellious, rebels, because if they admitted they fought for freedom, then Europe would look like a villain it was, and they don't want that. But courage cannot be erased. Courage, it's a reincarnation, or it reincarnates in every generation that refuses science. Not science, that refuses silence. Now, when we talk about all this, we never cease to talk about diaspora. Because when they took our African brothers and sisters across the Atlantic, they couldn't take Africa out of them. Africa is still in black Americans. Africa is still in the enslaved Africans. Now, on the plantations on the Atlanta, enslaved Africans carried rhythm from Africa, from the motherland, to the plantations. They carried it in their bones. The blues, jazz, reggae, samba, hip-hop, all of these are African-speaking exile. Every note said, I remember, from Haiti revolution back then, it was led by this Haitian. The Haiti revolution was led by Toussaint Louverture and the Salians. From that Haiti revolutions back then, because Haiti is the first black country to earn independence, then came civil rights back then, the march that were guarded by Garvey dream of a united Africa. The diaspora kept the flame alive up to now. They didn't just survive, but they transformed the pain into culture and changed into creativity. And as the world danced to the rhythms of black people, it unknowingly worshipped what it once enslaved. The African spirit refused extinction, but it traveled through oceans, it traveled through bloodlines, it traveled through generations, waiting for the moment of reawakening. And this reawakening, and that's where we have Pan-Africa, we have a Pan-African call. Because that awakening came in voices like thunder. Marcus Garvey declared that a people without knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots. Kwame Nkrumah, Patrice Lumumba, Julius Nyerere, Haile Selassie, they all talked about this. They all envisioned an Africa united beyond borders. They knew independence without unity would be illusion. When the colonial flags came down, the colonizers didn't leave. They just changed the uniform. But you know what happened? Economic change replaced physical ones. Loans replaced whips. Propaganda replaced guns. Pan-Africanism was the antidote of these things, or it's still the antidote of this. It said that the continent and the diaspora are not two worlds. They are one heartbeat separated by history. And that's why they feared Mugabe. That's why Lumumba was unalived, because a united black world will mean an end of global dependency. And this may lead to the rebirth of global balance. Now, when I talk about all these things, some things too are spiritual. We call it spiritual. I call it spiritual rebirth, because there's a vibration moving across the planet right now, and you can feel it. If you don't feel it, be calm. You can feel this vibration that is moving on in the continent. You can feel it in the music, and you can feel it in the fashion, you can feel it in the language, you can feel it in the confidence, because black people everywhere right now are starting to remember, and this is not a trend. This is a frequency shift. The ancestors are speaking again through creativity. The ancestors are speaking again through courage, through consciousness. For centuries, they tried to convince us that our spiritual was backward. But see what's happening right now. The world studies meditation. They studied energy. They study vibration. These are the concepts that our elders lived by naturally. We are returning to alignment without permission. The old systems are losing their grip because they were built on amnesia. So once memory returns, the control will end. And this is why this moment is sacred. It is not rebellion, but it is a moment of remembrance. And Africa, in the age of information, the internet became what the drum was once. Because right now we are using internet, but back then in Africa we used drums. A messenger where colonizers once silenced letters. Right now we are using hashtags, and young Africans are teaching history on TikTok. They are teaching history on YouTube. They are decoding pyramids. They are building an African network on social media. So the gatekeeper of information have lost their monopoly. Every digital post exposing African brilliance dismantles a century of propaganda. And when a Kenyan, when a Jamaican, when a Nigerian and African American speak in one common thread, then borders will dissolve. And this is what Pan-African want. Unity through data. That unity, that's what we want. And for the first time, Africa right now can tell her own story in their own way. They can tell their own story to the world without translation. And the world is listening, because once whispered is now viral. And all of these things that are happening, just know that the system is trembling. The system is trembling because things are going fast. It's a return of diaspora, and this means a lot because it's happening right now. Black Americans are visiting Kenya, Caribbeans are visiting Ghana, and the movement is not tourism. The movement is reconnection. Now, that's my video for today. If you have something to tell me in the comment section. Until next episode, peace out.